All right, one of our subscribers asked this: I've heard other artists use the term relative values when talking about color. What does that mean, and why does it matter to know? Well, I thought you'd never ask. Okay, relative value as it relates to colors means the value of the color. That's why it's called relative. Now, we can begin with the color wheel itself to explain that, because to begin with, all colors at their high saturation have a relative value. You might call it an inherent value. And by the way, you might hear that used, or it's also called intrinsic value, the value of the local color, the color as it is on the surface. Well, we could start with the color wheel maybe and kind of help you get this. So, on the color wheel, of course, we're all accustomed to looking at this, but let's look what happens when we throw these into values, these colors on the traditional color wheel. Now, this is as the computer reads it. Let's get this flattened out here. Now, there you go. So, as the computer reads it, reads these colors in values, you can see that the relative, the inherent, these are the high saturated colors that the computer could come with at these particular hue registrations. Okay, so you already knew this probably, that yellow would be the lightest, and you can see the computer reads yellow. It's very light, though not the lightest light, and that's important to remember, that we used to think of yellow as being very bright, but it's not the lightest possible light, the color of yellow as we see it on the wheel. And then you can notice how as orange gets added into yellow, it begins to get a little darker. Did I say that? As red gets added into yellow and creates a yellow-orange, it begins to get a little darker. And then you can see as red, more red is added into yellow, it gets even a little bit darker, and then a tiny bit darker as it continues to go around. You can see here the relative value of red is darker than the relative value of yellow. And then you can watch as this goes around the wheel. You can see that blue, the relative value of blue, is the darkest value at the high saturation on the wheel. Now, one way we might be able to understand this, though, is how that relative value changes when we consider the light, or how light is hitting a subject. So let's take a look at this. We'll just take this one away for the moment. And I have here, obviously, some oranges. Now, what I want you to notice is we use the term relative value to talk about the value of the color as we see it. Now, when we're just thinking of color by itself, we're thinking of the high saturation of a color, and that relative value is what we're just talking about. But then that changes when light comes into the picture. When the light rays hit a surface, they change the value. They also change the color, or they change the hue of the color. And that's where it really becomes important to understand relative value. So we can see here, I can do a little bit of demonstration here to help you to see that too. We can see here that the relative values of orange, this is orange, and of course the relative value of this, if we were holding that orange in our hands, we would find first of all that the actual color, hue of that orange actually falls somewhere between orange and yellow-orange. Now, if I was holding an actual orange in my hand, that would be easier to see because in this photograph the light is striking. But we can sort of see that here. So the relative value, or the relative value of the local color, would be something like this. And I'll just put this here on the palette. It's not, well, we can sort of gauge it too by just doing a little bit of a test strip here, and we can pull that right in here. We can see that actually falls in that yellow-orange range. But then as we think of the local color, local hue of value, we'd have to add a little bit of yellow-orange, the orange itself, have to add a little bit of red into that to bring that on closer to the actual hue, relative hue of the orange. And so if we had an orange here, if that were the orange we had been photographing, we would see a slight hue difference between this right in here and then this. So this gets to be more right in here. Now, when the light hits any surface, where the light is, especially if that surface is a rounded surface, spherical surface, or even, it's more visible in a spherical surface, but any surface the light hits, it changes where the light is in direct alignment. Those light rays hitting a color, a hue, changes the value and changes the color. Now we can show you that right here, and that's important for you to know as an artist, because if you make that kind of change, if you're a realistic painter and you make that kind of change, then your subject or your painting is going to be more representational of what your eyes are actually seeing. Alright, so we see right here in this part of this orange, just looking at this one, where that surface is in alignment with the light rays, considering the light here, it seems to be coming in this direction. You see how that changes. Now what kind of change does it make? Well, it appears to go a little bit closer to actual yellow-orange, so I'll just pull some yellow-orange back on the palette here. And it would hold that here and say, no, it's even more yellow than that. And you can look for that kind of thing to happen, that when the light rays hit it, a warm color like this is going to move more to the direction of yellow. You can see that in almost any color. When the light rays hit it, it wants to get warmer. And getting warmer means it moves more towards yellow or more towards red, depending on what the color is. If the light rays are hitting blue, if you look at the way the light rays would be hitting denim, blue denim, think blue jeans. If you look at how the light rays would be hitting, you can see where the light is actually hitting it, it moves right in this direction, changing the local value, changing the relative value, and changing the hue. You see why we say relative. The value is related to the hue. So when the hue changes, the value most likely is going to change too, especially as the light hits it. Alright, so let's just continue to do that. Now, we're in here, in the relative value, we're here. We're more like this value right here, and then it moves up to this value right here, up towards the orange. But as light rays are hitting, it's moving more in this direction here. So it's becoming a little more yellow and lighter in value. Alright, so let's try that out here. We'll add a little bit more yellow to this, and we'll see that, just a little bit more than that. Let me pull it right here. That's something I did that you should never do, and that is reach into color with a dirty palette knife. Alright, right here, add that one. Now let's hold it up. You can see, we see here on the outside edges how that, where the light rays are not hitting quite so strong, right in here, now we're seeing that change more towards the yellow. You see right here, if I hold that up, you can see that it's getting lighter and getting more towards yellow. Alright, let's put a little bit more yellow into it and see what happens. And the point we will reach a point that the light rays themselves start subtracting the hue out. And so we'll go first of all to this, just adding a little bit more yellow to this and see what happens. Right, there's a little bit more yellow, and then we can see as we hold it up in here. Alright, so that is about as far as the hue is going to go before it starts subtracting hue. So we're in this value range right here. We're between these two value ranges. Then what happens? Well, the light rays themselves, when they're hitting that surface, then they begin to pull the hue out of the surface and make that surface even lighter in value. All right, let's go in and pull a little bit of white into that and see if we can make that happen. So I'll just reach over for a little bit of white and just for right in here Let's see how close we can get. I'm going to have to get a new test strip here. Let's see how close we can get. We're getting it lighter in value, and we're subtracting color out. Now let's see. Well, no, that's not it. You see, we have too much yellow now, so we need to reach back into the orange. Now, that's a good exercise for you to realize how far the light rays move towards yellow, and then when do the light rays start subtracting color out, therefore making the value lighter. So we'll move backwards. Need to move backwards just a little bit here to find that where the light rays are actually hitting, because they are looking less yellow and more like it's leaning towards orange. So let's check that out. Get another test strip here, and we will just do that right here. Pull that right here, and let's see. Is that? Nope. That doesn't do it, because that means now we put too much yellow from moving in that direction. So see, this is the way you work out these experiments scientifically in order to help you to know then what to do. You don't have to remember formulas. You don't have to do anything I tell you to do. If you know how to work these problems out scientifically, thinking about what's happening to hue and what's happening to value, then you can discover these things for yourself. So this is a wonderful process. So let's go back now, and let's just reach back into this original yellow-orange. Now let's try moving in the white direction there. So I'll add to that white. Get the white over here, and let's pull just a little bit in here. And that looks, to my eye, closer. So I'll put this right here on the little test strip, and we're getting much closer. All right, let's add more white. Now, here's the deal about the white paint. White pigment actually cools a color down a little bit, as well as makes it lighter in value, but sort of cools it down just a little bit. Now, the reason for that is that white is actually neutral. It's a more neutral color. White pigment is more of a neutral, meaning it has all colors in it. And because it has all colors in it, it's going to slightly neutralize any color that you add to it. So let's add just a little bit more here. Let's see how far we can take that. You can watch that happen. It neutralizes more color, subtracts yellow out. Now see, there we're getting very, very close. Now if I back up, you actually see the effect of how the light, it gets more yellow in this direction, and then when that light hits it, I'm going to go back to the original color here and add the white into the original color. And you're going to see this happen in front of your own eyes, how white pigment actually affects color. So we're probably not quite there yet. So now what we'll do is we will pull more of the, we'll go for less yellow and more of the original color. So let's go right back in here to this original color. Yeah, I know it's self-contradictory, but it's the way color works. You just have to understand how color works and how light works to make these things happen. So as long as there's some hue left, it moves from the value and the color of the local color till it reaches a certain point. At that point where it's in direct light, the yellow goes away. And so let's try this right here and see what we have. So that's going back to the original color for the highlight. You might call it the highlight. That's the point at which the surface is in direct alignment with the light, and you can see there it is right there. So you see how that works, and that then ends up being the lightest value. Now if I had this in the computer, it would show as an even lighter value than yellow, but you can sort of squint and see that. If I hold these, you see that slightly. You squint and look at this as compared to yellow, it's slightly lighter. So it's a matter of understanding how a color changes in value, changes in hue, it also changes in value. And one way that you can see that is always comparing, by squinting, comparing one color to the other. Well, so maybe play with that idea with other colors, following that process that I just used, where first of all you find the local value. I didn't go into the darker part of it, but it works the same way, moving in the other direction. So finding first of all the local color, the relative color of what the thing is, as you would be holding in your hand. So that would be right in here. Then watching as the light hits it, watch how both the hue and the value change, and then watch what happens when that surface is in direct contact with the strongest light rays. How so much of the warmth of the color goes away, and that actual highlight of that color ends up being a little bit more neutral. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell, so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to dyingminds.com, where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.